Welcome to Stop the Fight. And today we are recapping yesterday's action between Carlos Takam and Joyce. Let's go!
Don't brag about taking my side piece! Don't brag about taking my side piece, though!
I broke my back. Back is broken. Spinal.
He's strong, man. Good boy. Just.
All right. The underheld, under 8.5, guys. So if, again, not financial advice, but if you did what I did, we made some money. It was a good night. It was an interesting fight. I think it lets us see the limitations of Joyce, and I think they're real. We'll talk about that in a second, but let's talk about why what happened. Now, as I said earlier, you're looking at a 41-year-old Carlos Takam. He was in his prime, a decent heavyweight. Let's call him in his prime, at his absolute best. He's a B- guy, right? He's never going to win a world title, but he's a good test, like a pretty decent fighter. After so many years, after so many fights, and after the knockouts he's had, I thought it was silly for people to believe that Carlos Takam would not only make the distance but win. Some people thought he would beat Joyce. I thought that was absurd. Now, he was significantly smaller than Joyce. Significantly. It looked like he was a thick kid. He is a thick kid, Carlos. But guys, he's 6'1.5", and you saw that. The only reason he was even able to get on the inside and stay there was due to the inadequacies in Joyce's boxing game. But Carlos Takam, he's now 39-6-1 with 28 knockouts, was never a murderous puncher. He never was, and I think it was very apparent in this fight as well. So all the people who were looking at the odds, I think Carlos Takam was like a plus 600. Guys, a lot of the times, there's a reason why nobody takes the plus 600. Because the casinos got it right. And this time it was right. The Carlos Takam was never going to beat Joyce. He doesn't have much power now. He's fighting against a big guy with a crazy chin. So your only bet is to outbox him. But Carlos Takam gassed against Chisora relatively recently. This is 3 years ago. And you expect his stamina to hold up for 12 rounds while moving and fighting against an even bigger guy than Chisora? Now, of course, styles make fights, but nonetheless, I think there was some arguments online about why Carlos Takam would beat Joyce. And I thought they were all silly. I thought there was practically no chance, I mean, it's heavyweight boxing. It's boxing. There's always a slight chance that a knockout punch lands. But it seemed like it was not going to happen. Not after the kind of fights that he's had. Even his last fight against Jerry Forrest, he didn't look particularly good. Who's he fought in his last few fights, Takam, after Chisora? Sanat Gashi, Craig Lewis, Fabio Maldonado, and Jerry Forrest. Now, those don't sound like, like top guys, and they're really not. They're not top guys. Those are all 10-round fights. So I think it was pretty easy not to bet on Takam. Now, the question was, well, where do we make money in this fight? If you saw the Joyce by knockout, I think it was a minus 260. That wasn't there, obviously. Minus 260. Guys, it's a fight, and especially when you're trying to nail a pick at minus 260. That's not it, guys. That's not how you don't place those kind of bets here, because simply the downside is too much. And again, at heavyweight boxing with Joyce, who is heavy-handed, he does have, I think, all but one win came by knockout. It was 13-0 now with 12 knockouts. So the minus 8.5, which means in the middle of the ninth round, if I goes to the middle of the ninth round, it seemed like the obvious choice. I think it was a minus 115 or something like that. Almost even money. And that was reasonable. That was a reasonable bet. I thought that was the only outcome. Joyce would obviously go forward, although it took him a while to start doing that. The much bigger guy with power, one who got Du Bois out of there, I thought that there was no way not to take him. So here we are, and to my shock, when we started to watch the fight, Carlos Takam starts kicking Joyce's ass. Round one, this guy cannot miss with his right hand. I think Carlos Takam hit Joyce at least 3 or 4 times, at least 3 times, like really clean, dead on right hands. So much so that I was telling my boy afterwards that if that had been Wilder in there, Joe Joyce is knocked out. He doesn't make it out of the second round. No way. Not with the amount of right hands he took. Joe Joyce's left hand was at his chest level the entire time. He never held it. He never held it to his face, no matter how many right hands he took. So there he was. There was Carlos Takam landing his right hand almost at will, outworking Joe Joyce for the first 2 rounds clearly. We get to the third, and it's a little bit more competitive, but Carlos Takam is winning those rounds. Guys, I'm telling you, at the time of the stoppage, I had Carlos Takam up 4 rounds to 1. I thought Carlos Takam won round 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I thought he won them quite clearly. I thought round 3, maybe if you're in the UK, those UK judges, UK announcers certainly thought that Joe Joyce did some work in round 3. But I thought it was 4 rounds to nothing going into the 5th. And in the fifth, Joe Joyce starts to take over. But I think that had more to do with the fact that Carlos Takam just kind of gassed after those 4 rounds. He landed a lot of punches. He landed his entire arsenal on Joyce. Well, the arsenal being the right hand. Numerous times. I even think at one point he kind of stunned Joyce in one of those rounds. Again, you can't tell because Joyce is kind of weird and flat-footed. So every time he takes an awkward step, maybe it looks like he kind of gets stunned. But you have Joe Joyce the entire time throwing a very lazy and slow. I mean, we always make fun of Joe Joyce being very slow, but he looked slow. He made the 41-year-old or 40-year-old, let me see, how old is Carlos? 40-year-old Carlos Takam look reasonably fast in there. And Carlos Takam is not a speed demon. So, Joe Joyce was slow. The punches were slow. The footwork was slow. The punches were coming. It was almost all arm punches, it looked like. It looks like he couldn't generate the force. I don't know what was going on in those first 4 rounds. But Joe Joyce was losing them all in my card. All of them. So you do have to give Carlos Takam props for that and, showing you a little bit of his youth. But you kind of, after landing everything you got for 4 rounds, I really wasn't worried because Carlos Takam's stamina is questionable. Even in the Povetkin fight, that was prime Takam. Povetkin was able to whittle him down. So by the time rounds 9 and 10 came, Takam just didn't have much left. I expected something similar over here as well. And in the 5th round, one thing that Joyce does do really well is he really did go to the body in the early rounds, especially I think in round 3 and 4. He really landed a few body shots that were very legit. And even if Joyce doesn't turn over his shots well, and he doesn't, let's be frank, he's similar to Vitaly Klitschko. So you don't necessarily need to turn over your shots to generate power. Vitaly Klitschko was similar to Joe Joyce in that sense. He looked like those punches shouldn't be generating that much power as he's not really turning them over. They're not coming from the legs. They're all arm punches or waist punches, And Joe Joyce is similar, but he's a big guy. He's a 6'6" guy who's, damn near 260, who is 263 actually, who is throwing those shots at you, and those shots are going to hurt. So you kind of saw, and in round 5, you saw that Carlos Takam's work rate plummeted tremendously. And Joe Joyce kind of just, what looked like pity bad shots were clearly having an effect on Takam. And that's when I knew in my head, I'm like, yeah, this fight is about to be, about to turn, and round 5 was the turning point, but I knew it was going to really turn in the next round. And in round 6, early on, Joyce lands a left hook, stunning Takam, and basically that was the fight. So what winds up happening is Joyce goes forward, starts throwing a barrage of punches with nothing coming back from Takam, and the ref stops it after, I don't know, maybe 30 unanswered blows, 20, 30 unanswered blows. Of course, Takam was protesting it, but his face was bloodied. He was clearly hurt. He couldn't answer any punches for a good 20 seconds. 20, 30 seconds. He took 20, 30 shots. Well, not all of them landed, of course. Let's say only a quarter of those shots landed. But nonetheless, the ref had every reason to stop the fight right then and there. Yes, could he have let it go on? Sure. But this fight was over. At this point, Carlos Takam was clearly gassed, and Joyce, after having taken all those shots, was not really affected by it. Carlos landed a lot of headshots on Joyce, but if you're gonna try and chop that big tree down, you need to start with that body. And that's kind of how the fight ended. Joyce, landing shots on Takam. Takam wasn't able to answer back, and the ref, like I said, had every reason and every right to stop the fight, even though it could have gone on. It could have went on, but he would have been stopped within the next round anyway. So congratulations to us who took the under 8.5. Again, I thought it was probably the only reasonable outcome in the fight. As I said, taking Joyce to win by KO, which is what I thought would have happened, we just didn't give you the odds, right? And I believe that with an aging fight, it was similar to Povetkin. In both Povetkin fights, I took the under. And both of them were like under 6.5 or 7. I forgot what it was. But it was, I'm like, I know with Povetkin, with Dillian White, these guys, the way that they hit, these fights are going to be over quickly. It was easy to pick both fights, especially the second time with Povetkin. It was super easy to pick the under 6.5 or whatever it was. So, yeah. So there we are with Joe Joyce. Congratulations to him. I thought he, regardless of how slow and awkward he looks, he really needs to fix those defensive flaws. But he did other things well. He went to the body, which few big heavies do. For a guy who's 6'6", he really went to the body. He was able to fight up close, but he still needs to learn how to use his size. The commentators, I think it was Ben Adelson or the Tyson Fury's trainer, the young kid, was nailed it right on the head. Carlos Takam was easily able to, not easily outmuscle him, but easily able to get inside and bully Joe Joyce. Now, as a big guy who's 6'6", you can't let that happen when a 6'1.5" guy does that. So you're 5 inches bigger, 20 pounds heavier. You need to learn how to lean on his neck. Vladimir Klitschko was sometimes, against Povetkin, Vladimir Klitschko barely landed anything, but he sapped every single bit of energy from Povetkin just by leaning on him. Yes, it makes for ugly fights. Yes, it makes for awkward viewings, and, it may affect your global appeal because you don't have, but you win. You win. You learn how to use your height. You teach the smaller man why he's a smaller man. You keep him on the outside, and you produce spectacular knockouts. And that's what Vladimir Klitschko, that's how he built his entire career. Went 10 years undefeated with that strategy. Jab, step in, hold, lean on neck, tire you out. By rounds 5 and 6, you're open up for the straight right hand. And, Vladimir Klitschko had one of the best right hands at heavyweight, probably historically speaking, to be frankly. And once he starts landing that right hand, it's over. You couldn't take too many Vlad right hands. Hell, you couldn't barely even take one. Remember, Anthony Joshua nearly got like one-shotted by that right hand, and that's an old Vlad. I'm telling you, if that was a Vlad from 3 years prior that fought Joshua, Joshua would have been slept. There's a prime Vlad, absolutely, I think, beats a prime Joshua simply because they're similar styles, similar fighters, but Vlad is clearly quicker on his feet. But that's neither here or there. So Joyce, so he needs to learn how to do that. Another thing is he needs to learn how to jab. He does not know how to jab. Joyce's jabs, they come in almost like a cartoonish toy way. So he needs to learn how to do that, and he needs to get that jab up. That jab is coming from his chest every time. And Carlos Takam, I'm telling you, in the first 2 or 3 rounds, he landed maybe 10 right hands that were like beyond clean. If that was Wilder or Joshua in there, this fight is over and Joyce does not get out of those 3 rounds. Yes, his chin held up against Takam, but Takam and Wilder and Joshua are completely different fighters and completely different power levels. You have Wilder land a right hand on you that cleanly, especially 3 times in 1 round, forget about it. Forget about it. This is timber. He's going down. Absolutely. This 6'6" giant would be chopped down by Wilder. I have no doubt in my mind. Wilder's significantly quicker. He's a significantly better puncher. And with Joe Joyce's inability to get his left hand to his chin, this fight is a wrap. Wilder in 3 rounds. I'm just the reason why I'm saying why I'm thinking Wilder's, and as I said on the previous podcast, Joe Joyce is now going to be in a long stretch of time. The 35-year-old is about to be in a long stretch of time without a championship fight. He needs a championship fight because at 35, you run into age, guys. Age. Yes, heavyweights age slower, but he needs to get his title shot ASAP because you want to cash him out. And like, because a little bit the book is out on you. You see what you have to do. You can box with him. His defense is poor and he's slow. But what he is he's a choo-choo train. a choo-choo train that keeps on coming. He keeps on coming. So I have to give him massive props for that. He actually kind of won me over a little bit in these past 2 fights. With the Du Bois fight, who I didn't think he'd beat Du Bois. I didn't place any money. I don't think he'd beat Du Bois, but he did, and he won him because Joyce is, not only does he have a great chin, he's super resilient, and he's able to keep pushing forward. He has a fighter's character, and sometimes that's just enough. I have to be a little bit critical on him, of course, and it sounds like I've been critical on him for 15 minutes, but you have to be, because he's now coming to the world championship level. And if you're not critical, and if you have you're in La La Land with these fighters, you're going to be shocked. So this is why I'm like that. So again, why am I saying Wilder? Well, Wilder Fury 3 happens in October. And if Fury wins, and it's not like a horrible blowout where Wilder doesn't retire on the spot, if Fury wins a close fight, he's going to go for the unification against Joshua, assuming Joshua beats Usyk. Again, absolutely none of this is, this is all very, very, very speculative discussion, simply because it is entirely in the realm of possibilities that Wilder absolutely knocks Fury out, and Usyk is just able to box around and outbox Joshua in a close fight. So these things can absolutely happen. But I'm assuming that Joshua and Fury win their next fights. What's Joyce to do then? Because this the Wilder Fury fight happens in October. You assume the negotiations have to take place again for Joshua. That happens in late spring, probably mid to late spring, because they're certainly not going to do it right away back to back with Wilder. No, because you want to build it up. So you're talking about probably April, May, right? So you probably have early, no, you can't have Cinco de Mayo because you're going to be competing with Canelo. So you're probably going to have early April, late May, even early June for a possible fight between Joshua and Fury. So then the next time that they can fight is probably in the fall. Does Joyce wait 13, 14 months? Does he turn 36, 37? I mean, he will. You know what I mean? This is like that old, I have a funny story. It's just a little tangential here, where doctors complain. Well, a kid going to med school is complaining. Well, he's 44 now. By the time I go to med school and do this stuff, in 10 years, I'm going to be 54, just becoming a doctor. And the question you ask him, well, how old are you going to be in 10 years if you don't go become a doctor? Right? Exactly. So time doesn't stop. So Joyce is going to be 36, 37 in 13, 14 months anyway. So what is he doing that time? Well, like I said, if the fight between Wilder and Fury is competitive enough that Fury continues his career, well, of course, Fury or Dillian Whyte is the fight to be made for Joyce, right? Fury, Wilder, or Dillian Whyte is the fight to be made for Joyce. And this is where we run into the problem of the left hand being low for Joyce, of taking right hands being a horrible, horrible recipe for disaster, especially against Wilder. He will absolutely put Joyce to sleep. And I don't believe Joyce in a fight, or in the next fight potentially, can fix that problem. Meaning that Joyce potentially fights Wilder next, and I believe, unfortunately for Joyce, that Wilder will absolutely stop him within the first 6 rounds. Absolutely. Absolutely. You guys, watch this Joyce-Takam fight and look at how many right hands Joyce-Takam is able to land clean. Now, of course, shots coming from under you in that angle is different than Wilder, which shots are going to be coming from on top of you, sort of, right at your eye level, right? Because I think Wilder's pretty much the same height as Joyce. Of course, all this stuff changes, but the problem still remains. Joyce could not keep his hands up to stop the right hands from coming, right? Dillian Whyte has something similar. Dillian Whyte throws a very looping right hand that we see him just absolutely demolish people with sometimes. That kind of right hand can also stop Joyce. So Joyce is in a very tough predicament. He needs to be in the gym tomorrow. So today he needs to be resting, drinking, eating, whatever he's going to do, enjoying himself, congratulations to Joyce-Takam, but he needs to be in the damn gym tomorrow, learning how to stop overhand rights that keep coming over his left hand. That is the only thing he needs to worry about right now. That, and then obviously using his body size. Because if he's going to have success against Wilder or Fury or Joshua or Dillian Whyte, he needs to be able to stop those right hands from coming over the top. because they're going to stop him. Maybe not Fury, but Joshua Wilder and White will absolutely stop him with those right hands. So that's what I think Joe Joyce has to do. Again, it was an interesting fight in the sense where you kind of see what Joyce-Takam, especially in his prime, was probably able to do. And you may wonder, well, how would he have done in his prime? I think the problem for Joyce-Takam is he's always had stamina issues, and I don't think he ever beats Joe Joyce. I just don't think he ever beats Joe Joyce. If you run out of stamina against a big guy like this, he's always going to stop you. And Joyce-Takam was always an 8-9 round fighter at most. He would be stopped probably late in the fight. Yes, he went the distance with Joshua, but that was a tentative Joshua. So I just, unfortunately for Takam, he's not at the world class, at the world championship level. The good thing for him is that he can go back and have another fight, because he really did kind of put it on Joyce for 4 rounds. He really did. Like I said, I had him winning for the first 5, for the first 4. So he can go fight. He can be someone who guards the top 10. So if you look at the top 10 in boxing, you have your Andy Ruizes, your Wilders, Whites, Usyks, Joshuas, Furies, right? And then you have like your Michael Hunters, your Parkers, Ortiz, those kind of Pulevs. Gassiev's now in the picture. But basically, you kind of out of wall, and you kind of see that a Joyce-Takam is a guy who's like really a top 15, 10 to 15 kind of guy. And he's really a guard to the top 10. You can't get, you'll have no chance at the top 10 if you cannot get through him. Right. So don't know where he goes next, but the ref kind of, the announcer was saying they did, in this case, save him to fight another day, ladies and gentlemen. Now, let's talk about the Friday fight. I did mention Isaiah Steen. In one of the more boring Showtime cards, he wound up beating Calvin Henderson in a pretty close fight. I didn't quite see from Steen like that, which makes me believe that he has a high ceiling. Again, he's relatively young, 24-year-old for a super middleweight is still relatively young, still gonna learn. But I think I don't know how I feel about the prospect. It was a close fight. It was 96-94 on 2 of the cards, on one of the cards, and 97-93 on 2 of the cards. So first defeat to Calvin Henderson, who fought well. He's a 31-year-old, but again, we're gonna have to see what else we can have from these guys. So that's gonna be your recap. That's gonna do it for me. I'll see you guys on a Thursday to talk about next week's fights. It's over.
I'm gonna go home and break my wife's hip.
Don't brag about taking my side piece. Don't brag about taking my side piece, though.
I broke my back. Back is broken. Spinal.
And she's strong, man, good boy, just.